So this is actually going to be the first of a couple of demonstration videos about completing other portions of your packet, which we will be working on primarily next week. If you remember, we have already finished this nose, so this one is done. You will be required to do these 3 noses. So this is step 1, this is step 2, 3, and 4. Step 1, step 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Simply because it is only 3 noses, but it does look like 6. But it's because these shading steps lead into these shading steps. So that one's done. This one you will be working on still. These ones are optional, but they can be helpful. This lip is done. You might need to practice a little bit more, and that's perfectly fine. The demo for this lip is live as of today. On this one, you will be required to do 1 of these 3 closed lips, and they're really just different in terms of how straight that crease in between the lips are. Because some people's lips are very straight, some are turned up a little bit, some are turned down, and it's just a good practice in observing exactly what type of line people's lips make. You will also be required to do 1 of the open lips. So either this one or this one, you do not have to do both. And this eye is already done. You will be required to do this eye. So again, you follow these steps very similarly to how we've done this. Pay attention to the do and don't over here because it does give you a little bit of advice. You will be required to pick either 1 of these 4 or you can draw this one. Because this one involves a nose, but it does have a little bit less detail. These ones don't have noses, but they do have more detail, so they are sort of the equivalent of each other. So again, 1 of these 4 or this one here. So then this page in between is optional. This is an interesting little study in sort of the angle of the eye and how it moves depending on the facial feature and depending on the direction that the person you are drawing is looking. So that can be a very helpful thing if you really enjoy drawing eye and you just want to learn a little bit more about how they change depending on where your subject is looking. So then this one you will be required to do the profile. And it's very important that you pay attention to these measurements here. So I will post a demonstration video of doing either this profile or this one, because you will get to pick which one you do, because they're basically the exact same concepts. So you can either do this profile or you can do this profile. So I'm going to put 1 or 2 here so that you know you can pick this one or the other one here. And then this page is completely optional. And again, it's very similar to the eye page in that it can be very helpful in figuring out sort of the angles of the head and how things change depending on where the person is looking. And then these are very helpful for measuring because it just gives you a breakdown of the proportions for the frontal view and for the side view. And I have had some people who prefer to do this one as their profile, and that's perfectly fine. So you really do have 3 options on the profile there. And I will, like I said, post some videos of me working on various parts of the packet. I will not probably be able to post a video for every single part of the packet, but I will try to post enough so that I can be helpful to you so that you can watch some of those as you are going. So I'm going to start with some of those noses that were towards the bottom of the page. I'll start, I think, with this one. So one thing to pay attention to when you are doing these noses is that on the first nose, you'll see that the bigger circle, which is the tip of the nose, is above the smaller circle and to the side. The smaller circle is the nostril. This one, the bigger and the smaller are even, and this one, the bigger, is below the smaller. So that is all going to be dependent upon whether the person's nostril is even with the tip of the nose, below the tip of the nose, or above the tip of the nose. So once again, I'm going to start with the one where the nostril is a little bit below the tip of the nose. So just like all of the other facial features we've drawn, I'm going to start with the very basic shapes here. And I'm going to start really nice and light. There's not a big overlap here. And I'm going to make sure that this circle is smaller. And that it is a little bit lower. So then I'm going to go ahead and move to step 2. And then as I move towards step 3, I'm going to go ahead and erase a little bit here. Kind of clean up this edge a little bit as well. So then before I erase this part, I am going to put a little shading here to show where that shadow goes, sort of on the far side of the tip of the nose and between the nostrils, sort of in that corner almost. Again, it's going to be a value transition from dark to light. And then I'm going to also go ahead and start shading on the outside part of my nostril here. Again, going from dark to light. Not getting in that darkest dark value yet, because like with everything, we are going to continue shading in layers. And once again, it is very important that you continue to look more at your subject, at your reference image, than at your paper. So I'm just going to put a little bit of some of that shading there that's on the side of my nose. It's almost like a triangle in shape, the shading is. And again, it starts very, very light. And you want it to sort of mimic the direction of the nose there. I'm going to shade a little bit here. Leaving a little bit of a reflected light around the bottom of that nostril area. And then this part will also be shaded similarly to how we did the original sphere. Leaving some reflected light along the outer edge. You can use your eraser and make that a little bit lighter there if you need for the reflected light. And remember, this is still pretty early in the shading game. So not all of my values are there yet. You really want to continue practicing getting all those different value transitions in your shading, because that is how you will achieve depth and start to really make things look three-dimensional and realistic. So again, I'm kind of treating it like a sphere here. Now I'm going to erase those original lines that I made here so that I can focus more on value transitions being that space rather than a line. Which is why, once again, it is very important to draw lightly. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to step 4, which is significantly darker. So I'm going to actually go ahead and move up with my pencil to a higher B and start with shading the darker area around the outside of the nose, getting lighter as I move away from that area. So once again, the nostril is typically still the darkest part of your nose because it is the hole in that area. There's a little shadow here under the nose, so I'm going to get that in there. And then I'm going to go in and add some shading around the nostril here. Still keeping that reflected light there, but keeping it soft. And then also darkening the actual volume portion of the nose here. Still using value transitions, so then pressing down more or less depending on the value that I see on the paper. So once again, it is all going to take place in a series of layers. The reflected light here kind of goes away as that shading does kind of merge. Then this area is going to get a little darker. But again, I'm still going to use a value transition going into that next value instead of just a gray area here. The tip of the nose here would get a slightly lighter area, kind of like a highlight in this section. So under that, I'm going to make it darker. I'm also going to sort of get rid of the reflected light here because it does just kind of softly go into the nostril. So you do want to pay attention to exactly where that reflected light remains a reflected light and where it sort of just changes into shadow and highlight. Because as you develop the shading in layers, that will absolutely happen. So I'm going to continue working on this nose with another video so that you can see a little bit more of the process there.